The dust kicked up beneath Grace Harper's worn boots as she stepped off the afternoon stage in Marysville, California, carrying everything she owned in a single carpet bag and wearing the weight of her past like chains around her ankles. It was September 1878, and the gold rush town still buzzed with rough energy despite its glory days having faded some 20 years prior. The wooden sidewalks crowded with miners, merchants, and men looking for whatever fortune they could scrape together in the Sierra Nevada foothills. Grace kept her eyes down as she walked toward the boarding house Mrs. Chen had written about in her letter, aware of how people's gazes lingered on her strawberry blonde hair and the emerald dress that marked her as different from the respectable women who hurried past in their drab calicos. She had left Sacramento 3 days ago with $50 saved and a desperate hope that nobody in Marysville would know what she had been. But small towns had long memories and loose tongues. The boarding house sat at the edge of town, a whitewashed 2-story building with a neat garden where vegetables grew in tidy rows. Mrs. Chen, a widow who had come west with her husband during the gold rush, opened the door before Grace could knock. "Miss Harper." The older woman's face was kind, weathered by years of California sun. "Your room is ready. I do not ask questions about where my boarders come from, only that you pay on time and cause no trouble." "Thank you," Grace said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am looking for honest work." "Do you know of any positions available?" Mrs. Chen studied her for a long moment. "The general store needs help with inventory. Mr. Patterson is decent enough, pays fair wages. I will speak to him tomorrow." That night, Grace lay in her small but clean room and listened to the sounds of Marysville settling into darkness. Somewhere down the street, a piano played in one of the saloons, the tinny music carrying through the warm autumn air and making her stomach clench with memories she wanted to forget. She had worked in the Silver Moon Saloon in Sacramento for 3 years, pouring whiskey and dodging grabbing hands, smiling until her face ached and pretending she did not hate every moment. She had never gone upstairs with the men, despite what people assumed, but working in a saloon marked you just the same. The next morning dawned clear and golden, the September sun already warm as Grace helped Mrs. Chen in the garden before breakfast. She was pulling weeds when she heard the sound of hoofbeats and looked up to see a tall cowboy leading his horse toward the boarding house. He moved with easy confidence, his Stetson shadowing a sun-bronzed face and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. Dust covered his boots and denims, marking him as someone who spent more time on the range than in town. "Morning, Mrs. Chen," he called out, his voice carrying a warm drawl. "I am hoping you have a room available for a few weeks. I am working the Miller Ranch this season and their bunkhouse is full up. Lucas Xerxes, you know I always have space for you." Mrs. Chen smiled. "Come in and I will get you settled. This is Grace Harper, my newest boarder." Lucas turned those dark eyes on Grace, and she felt something flutter in her chest that she quickly pushed down. She had learned not to trust handsome men with easy smiles. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Harper." He touched the brim of his hat politely. Grace nodded but did not speak, gathering her basket of weeds and hurrying back inside. She could feel his gaze following her, and it made her skin prickle with awareness she did not want to feel. Over the following days, Grace settled into a rhythm. Mr. Patterson hired her to work in his general store, organizing stock and helping customers. The work was honest and simple, and she was grateful for it. She kept her head down and spoke only when necessary, but she could not help noticing how people whispered when she walked past, how the respectable women pulled their children closer, and the men's eyes followed her with speculation. Lucas Xerxes took his meals at the boarding house, coming in dusty and tired from long days working cattle. He was unfailingly polite to Grace, always nodding good morning and thanking her if she passed him the butter or salt. She noticed how he treated Mrs. Chen with genuine respect, how he helped carry water from the well without being asked, how his laughter came easy and warm when the older woman told stories about the early gold rush days. On Sunday, Grace's second week in Marysville, she was walking back from the general store when she heard voices in the alley beside the hardware shop. She would have kept walking except she heard her own name. That is her, the new girl at Mrs. Chen's place. The speaker was Martha Winters, the banker's wife, and her voice dripped with disdain. Susan Riley has a cousin in Sacramento who recognized her right away. She worked at the Silver Moon Saloon, one of those women who entertains men. A saloon girl, another woman gasped. Right here in Marysville, someone should speak to Mrs. Chen. Respectable people should not have to associate with her kind. Grace felt the blood drain from her face. She hurried past, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. She had known this would happen eventually, but she had hoped for more time. She had hoped that maybe, just maybe, she could start over. That evening at dinner, she could barely eat. Lucas sat across from her at Mrs. Chen's table, and she felt his concerned gaze on her throughout the meal. When Mrs. Chen stepped into the kitchen to fetch more bread, he spoke quietly. "Are you all right, Miss Harper? You seem troubled." "I am fine," she said, staring at her plate. "You do not look fine." His voice was gentle. "If something is wrong, maybe I can help." Grace looked up sharply. "Why would you want to help me? You do not even know me." "Maybe I would like to." He smiled, and it reached his eyes in a way that made her chest ache. "You seem like someone who could use a friend." Before she could respond, Mrs. Chen returned and the moment passed. But Grace found herself thinking about his words long into the night. The whispers grew louder over the next few days. Mr. Patterson called Grace into his back office on Wednesday afternoon, his expression uncomfortable. "Miss Harper, I have had some complaints from customers. Ladies who feel uncomfortable shopping here with you present." He would not meet her eyes. "I am sorry, but I cannot afford to lose their business. I will pay you through the week, but I cannot keep you on." Grace nodded numbly. She had expected this, but it still felt like a punch to the stomach. She collected her wages and walked back to the boarding house in the afternoon heat, wondering how she would pay rent without work, wondering if she should just leave Marysville entirely. Lucas was sitting on the porch when she arrived, cleaning his saddle. He took one look at her face and set down his work. "What happened?" "Nothing that concerns you," she said, trying to move past him. He stood, blocking her path gently. "Grace, talk to me." The use of her first name, the genuine concern in his voice, broke something inside her. "They know," she said, her voice shaking. "The whole town knows what I was. Mr. Patterson let me go because respectable women do not want to shop where a former saloon girl works. Is that what you wanted to hear?" She expected judgment, disgust, the same look she had been getting from everyone else. Instead, Lucas's expression softened. "That is what people are whispering about, your past." "Yes." Grace lifted her chin defiantly. "I worked at a saloon in Sacramento for 3 years. I poured drinks and sang and smiled at men who thought I was available for more, though I never went upstairs with any of them. Not that anyone believes that. So now you know. You can go back to your saddle and leave me alone." Lucas was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Then he said something that made her breath catch. "Your past does not matter to me." Grace stared at him. "What?" "I said your past does not matter to me." He stepped closer, his dark eyes earnest. "What matters is who you are now. And from what I have seen, you are a hard-working, honest woman trying to build a better life. Anyone who judges you for surviving the best way you could is not worth your time." Tears spilled down Grace's cheeks before she could stop them. "You do not understand. This will follow me everywhere. I will never be able to escape it." "Then stop running." Lucas's voice was firm but kind. "Stand your ground. Show them who you really are." "And who am I?" The question came out broken. "Someone stronger than they will ever know." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Someone worth knowing." Grace felt something crack open inside her chest, some frozen place she had locked away. She wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. Over the following weeks, Lucas became her unexpected champion. When Grace sat alone at church, he sat beside her, ignoring the scandalized whispers. When she walked through town and people turned away, he walked with her, tipping his hat to the women who refused to acknowledge her and making easy conversation that helped fill the awkward silences. "Why are you doing this?" Grace asked him one evening as they sat on Mrs. Chen's porch watching the sunset paint the Sierra Nevada foothills gold and purple. "Associating with me will hurt your reputation too." Lucas leaned back in his chair, his long legs stretched out. "I grew up in Texas, on a ranch that barely scraped by. My father drank away what little money we had, and my mother worked her fingers to the bone trying to keep us fed. When I was 16, I left and started working cattle drives. I have been all over the West these past 8 years, seen every kind of person there is." He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "I learned that the people who judge others the harshest are usually trying to hide their own sins. Those respectable ladies whispering about you, half of them married for money, not love. The men talking about how you should not be allowed in decent society. Most of them frequent saloons themselves. They just do it where their wives will not find out." "But I actually did work in a saloon," Grace said quietly. "So, you worked an honest job in a hard world. You did not steal or cheat or hurt anyone. You survived." Lucas reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm around hers. "That takes more courage than most people will ever have." Grace looked down at their joined hands, feeling something bloom in her chest that she was afraid to name. "You barely know me, Lucas. Then let me know you better." His voice dropped lower, intimate. "Have dinner with me tomorrow, not here at the boarding house, but a real dinner. There is a restaurant on the other side of town, run by a family from Mexico. The food is good and the people are kind. Lucas." She hesitated, fear and hope warring inside her. "If you are seen courting me, people will talk. Let them talk." He squeezed her hand gently. "Grace, I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the day I arrived. I see how kind you are to Mrs. Chen, how you help her in the garden without being asked. I see how you hold your head high even when people are cruel. I see your strength and your grace, and I want to know everything about you." "Everything about me is not pretty," she whispered. "I do not need pretty stories. I need real ones." He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, the gesture so tender it made her breath catch. "Give me a chance, please." Grace found herself nodding before she could talk herself out of it. "All right, one dinner." Lucas's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "One dinner, we will start there." The next evening, Grace put on her best dress, a simple blue cotton that she had made herself. It was modest and plain compared to the emerald silk she had worn in the saloon, but it made her feel more like herself. Lucas arrived at the boarding house with his hair still damp from bathing, wearing clean denims and a pressed shirt, looking nervous and hopeful in a way that made her heart skip. They walked through town together as the September evening cooled, and Grace tried to ignore the stares and whispers. Lucas kept up an easy stream of conversation, telling her stories about cattle drives and ornery horses, about sleeping under the stars, and the time a rattlesnake got into the cook's tent, and caused a stampede of cowboys in their long underwear. The restaurant was small and warm, filled with the scent of spices and cooking meat. The owner, Mrs. Delgado, greeted them with a smile and showed them to a table by the window. Over plates of beef tamales and rice, Grace found herself relaxing, laughing at Lucas's stories and sharing some of her own. "I grew up in Ohio," she told him. "My father was a school teacher and my mother took in sewing. We were not wealthy, but we were happy. Then the war came." Her voice caught, and Lucas waited patiently for her to continue. "My father joined the Union Army in 1862. He was killed at Shiloh. My mother tried to keep us going, but the grief broke her. She died 2 years later, and I think it was more from a broken heart than anything else. I was 17, alone with no money and no family." "How did you end up in California?" Lucas asked gently. "I heard about opportunities out west. I saved every penny from domestic work and bought a ticket on a wagon train in 1875. But when I got to Sacramento, I discovered that respectable work for single women paid starvation wages. I tried sewing, laundry, working in a boarding house, but I could barely afford food." She met his eyes, needing him to understand. "The saloon offered 3 times what any other job paid. I took it because I wanted to survive, not just exist. I wanted to save money and build a real life." "And now you are here," Lucas said, his gaze steady and warm. "Now I am here," Grace agreed, trying again, hoping this time will be different. "It will be." Lucas reached across the table and took her hand. "I will make sure of it." They talked until the restaurant closed, and Lucas walked her back through the moonlit streets of Marysville. At the boarding house door he hesitated, then leaned down and kissed her cheek, his lips soft and warm against her skin. "Thank you for tonight," he said quietly, "for trusting me with your story." Grace found herself smiling, really smiling for the first time in longer than she could remember. "Thank you for listening." Over the following weeks, Lucas courted Grace with a determination that was both endearing and overwhelming. He brought her wildflowers picked from the foothills, taught her to ride his gentle mare on Sunday afternoons, and took her on long walks where they talked about everything and nothing. He told her about his dreams of saving enough money to buy his own ranch, about wanting a place to call home after years of drifting. "I want land where I can run cattle and horses, where I can build a house and put down roots," he said one afternoon as they sat by the Yuba River, watching the water rush past. "I want a family, children who grow up knowing they are loved and safe. I want a life that means something." "That sounds wonderful," Grace said wistfully. "You will make it happen. You are the most determined person I have ever met." Lucas turned to her, his expression intense. "I want to make it happen with you." Grace's heart stuttered. "Lucas, we have only known each other for a month." "I know." He took her hands, his grip firm and sure. "But I also know that I have never felt this way about anyone. When I am with you, everything makes sense. When I think about my future, you are in every part of it." "The town still whispers about me," Grace said, though her protest felt weak even to her own ears. "If you tie yourself to me, you will always be fighting against those whispers. Then we will fight together." Lucas pulled her closer, his dark eyes searching hers. "Grace, I am not a perfect man. I have a temper sometimes, I am stubborn, and I have made plenty of mistakes. But I promise you this. I will spend every day proving that your past does not matter to me, only our future. I will work hard to give you the life you deserve. I will stand beside you against anyone who tries to tear you down, and I will love you with everything I have. You love me." Grace's voice came out barely above a whisper. "I do." Lucas cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle. "I love your strength and your courage. I love your kindness and your smile. I love how you help Mrs. Chen in her garden and how you are not afraid to speak your mind to me. I love everything about you, Grace Harper, and I want to spend my life showing you." Tears streamed down Grace's face, but this time they were tears of joy. "I love you too," she said, the words feeling like breaking free of chains. "I did not think I could feel this way about anyone, but you make me believe in good things again. You make me believe in myself." Lucas kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Grace melted into him, feeling safe and cherished in a way she had never experienced. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is fast, I know people will talk, but I do not want to wait. Marry me and let me spend the rest of my life making you happy." Grace laughed through her tears. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." They were married 3 weeks later in Mrs. Chen's garden, with the autumn sun warm on their faces and the Sierra Nevada mountains standing witness in the distance. Mrs. Chen stood as Grace's witness, beaming with pride, while Lucas's friend Tom Miller from the ranch stood up for him. The ceremony was simple, performed by a traveling preacher who did not care about gossip, and when Lucas kissed his bride, Grace felt like she was finally home. The town's reaction was mixed. Some people were scandalized that Lucas Xerxes had married a former Saloon girl, but others, particularly those who knew Lucas's character, rallied around the couple. Tom Miller offered Lucas a permanent position as ranch foreman with a small house on the property, saying he needed someone reliable and hardworking. Mrs. Chen threw them a wedding dinner and invited everyone she knew, creating a buffer of support around the newlyweds. Grace and Lucas moved into the little ranch house at the edge of the Miller property, a 2-room cabin that needed work but had good bones. Together they painted walls, mended the roof, and planted a garden. Grace had never been happier than she was working beside Lucas, building their life with their own hands, but not everyone was willing to let the past rest. One evening in late October, Grace was walking home from Mrs. Chen's boarding house where she had been helping with some sewing when 3 women blocked her path. Martha Winters stood in the center, flanked by 2 other bankers' wives, their faces pinched with self-righteousness. "Mrs. Xerxes," Martha said, making Grace's married name sound like an insult. "We are here representing the Ladies' Improvement Society. We have been discussing your presence in Marysville, and we feel it sets a bad example for our daughters." Grace felt her face flush but kept her voice steady. "I am simply living my life, Mrs. Winters. I have done nothing to harm you or your daughters. Your very existence in polite society is harmful," one of the other women snapped. "Women like you should not be allowed to pretend to be respectable. Women like me," Grace's temper, usually well-controlled, flared. "Women who had to survive alone in a harsh world. Women who worked hard and never stole or lied or hurt anyone. Or do you mean women who did not have rich husbands to support them?" Martha's face reddened. "How dare you? No, how dare you?" Grace stepped forward, surprising them. "You know nothing about my life or what I have endured. You sit in your comfortable homes with your servants and your security, and you judge me for doing what I had to do to survive. But I am not ashamed anymore. I am a good person, I am a faithful wife, and I have more integrity in my little finger than you have in your entire bodies." "Well, I never," one of the women gasped. "Maybe you should have," Grace shot back. "Maybe if more women stood up for each other instead of tearing each other down, we would all be better off. Now, if you will excuse me, my husband is waiting for me at home." She walked past them with her head high, her heart pounding but her steps steady. She did not look back. When she reached the ranch house, Lucas was waiting on the porch, clearly having heard the confrontation from where he had been working nearby. He pulled her into his arms without a word, holding her tight. I am so proud of you, he murmured against her hair. You did not let them make you small. Grace buried her face in his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and sunshine that was uniquely him. I am tired of being ashamed of surviving. You taught me that. We taught each other. Lucas tilted her face up to kiss her softly. Come inside. I have something to show you. He led her into their bedroom where he had been working on a surprise. He had built a beautiful wooden chest, carved with intricate designs of flowers and vines. It is for you, he said, suddenly shy. For your hope chest. I know we are already married, but I wanted you to have something special, something that is just yours. You can put your dreams in it, your keepsakes, whatever you want. Grace ran her fingers over the smooth wood, overwhelmed by the care and love evident in every detail. Lucas, it is beautiful. You made this. My grandfather was a carpenter. He taught me some before he died. I wanted to make something that would last, something you could pass down to our children someday. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. I want to give you everything, Grace. A home, a family, a life full of love. I want you to know every single day how much you mean to me. Grace turned in his arms and kissed him deeply, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. You already give me everything that matters. You give me yourself. That winter was the happiest Grace had ever known. She and Lucas settled into married life with an ease that felt miraculous. They woke early to work the ranch alongside Tom Miller and his hands, spent evenings by the fire talking and dreaming, and fell asleep in each other's arms every night. Lucas was patient and loving, always making sure Grace felt cherished and safe. He had a way of looking at her that made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world, and his touches were always gentle, reverent, full of wonder that she was his. In December, Grace realized she was pregnant. She told Lucas on Christmas Eve as they sat before the fireplace, snow falling softly outside their window. For a moment, he just stared at her, and then he let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was breathless with laughter. A baby, he kept saying, his face alight with wonder. We are going to have a baby. Are you happy? Grace asked, though his reaction left no doubt. Happy. Lucas set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands. Grace, you have given me everything I ever dreamed of and more. A home, a family, a reason to wake up grateful every morning. I am going to be a father. Of course I am happy. He knelt down and pressed a kiss to her still flat stomach, and Grace felt tears slip down her cheeks. This man, this wonderful, stubborn, loving man had taken her broken pieces and helped her become whole again. The pregnancy was not easy. Grace suffered from terrible morning sickness through the winter, and Lucas was there every morning to hold her hair and bring her cool water. As spring arrived and her belly swelled, he became fiercely protective, insisting she rest more and take on fewer chores. Tom Miller's wife, Alina, befriended Grace and helped her prepare for the baby, teaching her to knit tiny clothes and sharing wisdom from her own 4 pregnancies. Some of the town women slowly began to warm to Grace, particularly after Father O'Malley from the Catholic Church gave a sermon about forgiveness and redemption that seemed pointed at the gossipers. Mrs. Delgado from the restaurant organized a small baby shower, inviting women who did not judge, and Grace found herself building a tentative community of support. But Martha Winters and her circle remained hostile. One afternoon in May, when Grace was 7 months pregnant and shopping at the general store for fabric, Martha loudly commented to her friends that it was shameful how some women trapped men into marriage. Lucas, who had been picking up supplies nearby, heard the comment. He set down what he was holding and walked over to where the women stood, his expression calm but his eyes dangerous. Mrs. Winters, he said, his voice carrying through the suddenly quiet store. I am going to say this once, and I hope you listen carefully. My wife is the finest woman I have ever known. She is kind, hardworking, honest, and brave. She did not trap me into anything. I pursued her. I courted her. I begged her to marry me because I knew I would never find anyone better. The fact that you cannot see her worth says everything about you and nothing about her. Martha's face turned scarlet. Mr. Xerxes, I was not— Yes, you were. Lucas cut her off. You were spreading poison because it makes you feel superior. But here is the truth. Grace has more integrity in one finger than you have in your whole body. She faced hardship and survived it with her dignity intact. She never hurt anyone, never stole, never lied. She simply worked hard in a job that paid enough to keep her alive. If that offends your delicate sensibilities, then I suggest you examine your own life and ask yourself if you have ever had to make a truly difficult choice. The store was silent. Grace stood frozen, torn between embarrassment and love for this man defending her so fiercely. Lucas turned to her, his expression softening. Come on, sweetheart, let us go home. He paid for their purchases and guided Grace out of the store, his hand protective on her back. Once they were outside, Grace started laughing, almost giddy with relief and love. You told off Martha Winters in front of half the town, she said, looking up at him with shining eyes. Someone needed to. Lucas grinned, looking pleased with himself. I am tired of people thinking they can say whatever they want about you. You are my wife, the mother of my child, and I will defend you until my last breath. Grace stood on her tiptoes and kissed him soundly, right there on the main street of Marysville. I love you so much. I love you too. He placed his hand gently on her swollen belly. Both of you. Their son was born on a sweltering August afternoon in 1879, arriving after 18 hours of labor that left Grace exhausted but elated. Lucas held her hand through all of it, wiping her brow and whispering encouragement, and when the midwife finally placed the squalling baby in Grace's arms, he wept openly. A boy, he said, his voice choked with emotion. We have a son. They named him William Thomas, after Grace's father and Lucas's grandfather. He had dark hair like his father and Grace's green eyes, and from the moment he drew breath, he owned their hearts completely. Lucas was a devoted father, walking the floor with William at night so Grace could sleep, changing diapers without complaint, and singing off-key lullabies that made Grace smile. He worked hard on the ranch during the day, but his evenings were devoted to his family. He would sit with William on his lap, talking to him about horses and cattle, about the mountains and the sky, about all the things they would do together when William was older. Grace had never seen anything more beautiful than watching her strong, capable husband cradle their tiny son with infinite gentleness. As William grew from infant to toddler, the Xerxes family became a fixture in Marysville. Lucas's steady character and hard work earned him respect throughout the community, and by extension, people began to accept Grace as well. It helped that she was genuinely kind, always ready to help a neighbor, quick to share what little they had when someone was in need. In 1881, when William was 2 years old and running everywhere on sturdy legs, Tom Miller made Lucas an offer that changed everything. Tom was getting older, and his children had no interest in ranching. He wanted to retire and move to San Francisco to be near his daughter. I want to sell you the ranch, Tom told Lucas one evening. I will give you a fair price and let you pay it off over time. You have been running this place like it is your own for years now. It should be yours. Lucas and Grace talked long into the night, going over finances and possibilities. It would be a stretch, but with Lucas's savings and the income from the cattle, they could make it work. In the morning, Lucas shook Tom's hand and they drew up the papers. By the end of 1881, Lucas and Grace Xerxes owned 200 acres of prime California ranch land. Lucas immediately set about expanding their herd and making improvements to the property. Grace managed the household accounts with careful precision, stretching every dollar. It was hard work, but it was theirs, and that made all the difference. In 1882, Grace discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in March of 1883, she gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine Marie. She had Lucas's dark coloring and Grace's delicate features, and William was immediately smitten with his baby sister, constantly wanting to hold her and show her his toys. The ranch prospered under Lucas's management. He had a gift for breeding quality cattle and horses, and his reputation for honest dealing spread throughout Northern California. Grace proved equally talented at managing the business side, keeping meticulous records and negotiating with buyers. Together they built something remarkable, a successful ranch and a loving family. More children followed over the years. Samuel Lucas was born in 1885, with Grace's red gold hair and a sunny disposition that charmed everyone. Then came the twins, Margaret and James, in 1887, two preemies who arrived early and scared their parents with their tiny fragility but ultimately thrived into healthy, rambunctious children. As the years passed and their family grew, Grace sometimes could not believe this was her life. She had gone from pouring whiskey in a Sacramento saloon to running a successful ranch with a husband who loved her and children who filled their home with laughter. The scared, ashamed girl she had been felt like a distant memory. Not that everything was perfect. Ranching was hard work with lean years and setbacks. There were droughts and disease, cattle thieves and equipment breakdowns. Lucas sometimes worked himself to exhaustion, and Grace worried about him constantly. They argued occasionally, usually about money or how much risk to take on the ranch, but they always talked through their differences and went to bed reconciled. The town whispers about Grace's past never fully disappeared, but they faded to background noise as the years went on, and the Xerxes family proved themselves over and over. The children attended school and church, growing up confident and loved, never knowing that their mother had once been the subject of scandal. By 1890, the Xerxes ranch was one of the most successful in the region. Lucas had built Grace the house he always promised her, a sprawling ranch house with a wide porch and enough bedrooms for their growing family. Grace kept a beautiful garden and became known throughout Marysville for her kindness and her excellent cooking. One evening in late summer, Lucas and Grace sat on their porch swing watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. The children were inside getting ready for bed, their laughter and arguing drifting through the open windows. Lucas had his arm around Grace and she leaned into his solid warmth, feeling utterly content. "You ever think about how we met?" Lucas asked, his voice reflective. "Sometimes," Grace smiled. "I think about how terrified I was that first day in Marysville, how certain I was that my past would ruin any chance at happiness." "Your past brought you to me," Lucas said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I would not change a single thing about your journey because it led you here." Grace turned to look at him, this man who had changed her life so completely. Silver threaded through his dark hair now, and lines creased the corners of his eyes from years of squinting into the California sun. He was 32 years old in the prime of his life, still strong and vital and so handsome he made her breath catch. "You saved me," she said quietly. "When I thought I was beyond saving, you showed me I was worth loving." "No, sweetheart." Lucas cupped her face gently, his dark eyes full of the same love she had seen on their wedding day. "You saved yourself. You had the courage to leave Sacramento, to start over, to face down judgment and build a new life. All I did was see you for who you really are and love you for it." "You did more than that." Grace placed her hand over his heart, feeling it beat steady and strong. "You gave me a home and a family. You gave me yourself. You stood beside me when no one else would. You made me believe I deserved good things. You deserve everything." Lucas kissed her softly. "You deserve the world, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to give it to you." From inside the house, William called out that the twins were fighting again, and Catherine was trying to mediate while Samuel cheered them on. Grace laughed and stood, reaching for Lucas's hand. "Come on," she said. "Our circus needs us." They walked inside together, ready to separate squabbling children and read bedtime stories, to tuck in their babies and kiss their foreheads and thank God for the gift of this loud, messy, beautiful life they had built together. The years continued to roll past like the seasons, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. William grew into a serious young man who loved ranching as much as his father did, already talking about expanding their herds and trying new breeding techniques. Catherine proved to have a head for numbers and started helping Grace with the ranch accounts by the time she was 12. Samuel was the dreamer, always sketching horses and mountains, talking about maybe becoming an artist someday. The twins were wild and inseparable, constantly getting into mischief that drove their parents to distraction and laughter in equal measure. In 1895, when Grace was 35 years old, she discovered she was pregnant one final time. The baby, another boy they named Daniel, arrived in early 1896, and Grace declared that 6 children were quite enough. Lucas agreed, though he would have welcomed a dozen more if Grace wanted them. He had proven over 17 years of marriage that his love for her only deepened with time, that he meant every word when he said her past did not matter to him. Grace became a pillar of the Marysville community, organizing charitable efforts and helping newcomers find their footing in town. She made a particular effort to help women who arrived alone or in difficult circumstances, remembering all too well what it felt like to be judged unfairly. More than one young woman found work and shelter through Grace's intervention, and she earned a reputation for seeing the best in people. Martha Winters never fully warmed to Grace, but by the late 1890s, even she had to acknowledge the Xerxes family's standing in the community. When her own son made some poor choices and found himself in trouble with the law, it was Grace who quietly helped arrange for a good lawyer and give the young man a job on the ranch to keep him out of further trouble. Martha never quite managed to thank her properly, but the hostility faded to grudging respect. On their 20th wedding anniversary in October 1899, Lucas took Grace back to Mrs. Chen's boarding house where they had first met. The elderly widow still lived there, though she now had help running the place, and she welcomed them with tears of joy. "I knew the first time I saw you two together," Mrs. Chen said, taking both their hands in hers. "I knew you would make each other happy." That evening, Lucas and Grace took a walk through Marysville, this town that had once seemed so hostile but had become their home. They walked past the general store where Grace had lost her first job, past the restaurant where they had their first date, past the church where they had baptized all 6 of their children. "You ever regret it?" Grace asked as they stood looking out at the mountains in the distance. "Marrying me despite everything." Lucas turned her to face him, his expression serious. "Grace Xerxes, I have never regretted a single moment with you. You are my partner, my love, my best friend. You have given me a life beyond anything I ever dreamed of. The only thing I regret is that I did not find you sooner." Grace reached up and pulled him down for a kiss, pouring 20 years of love and gratitude into it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, she rested her forehead against his. "I love you," she whispered. more than words can say. I love you too, Lucas replied, always and forever. They walked home hand in hand as the stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first tentative conversations on Mrs. Chen's porch 20 years ago. The same stars that would watch over their children and grandchildren for generations to come. As the new century dawned, the Xerxes family continued to thrive. William married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring county and started his own herd on land Lucas helped him purchase. Catherine married the new schoolteacher, a gentle man who appreciated her sharp mind and supported her desire to continue helping with the ranch accounts. Samuel did indeed become an artist, selling paintings of the California landscape while still helping out on the ranch during busy seasons. Lucas and Grace grew older together, their hair silvering, their hands growing weathered from decades of hard work, but their love never wavering. They sat on their porch in the evenings and watched grandchildren play in the yard where their own children had played. They shared coffee at dawn before starting their daily work, and they fell asleep in each other's arms each night, still grateful for the miracle that had brought them together. Grace sometimes thought about that terrified young woman who had stepped off the stage in Marysville in 1878, carrying nothing but a carpet bag and the crushing weight of her shame. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that everything would be all right, that she would find love and acceptance and a home beyond anything she could imagine, that the whispers would fade and the pain would heal, and one day she would stand on her own land surrounded by children and grandchildren and know that she was exactly where she belonged. But mostly she was just grateful. Grateful for Mrs. Chen's kindness in giving her a chance. Grateful for Lucas's love in seeing past her history to who she really was. Grateful for the community that eventually accepted her, and the children who called her Mama and the life she had built from ashes. In 1910, when Lucas was 50 and Grace was 48, they threw a massive party to celebrate 30 years of marriage. All 6 of their children attended with their families, plus what seemed like half of Marysville. There was food and music and dancing, and at one point Lucas stood up and gave a toast that made Grace's eyes fill with tears. 30 years ago, he said, his voice carrying across the crowded yard, I met a woman who changed my life. People told me I should not pursue her, that her past made her unsuitable. But I saw what others could not or would not see. I saw strength and courage and beauty inside and out. I saw a woman worth fighting for. He turned to Grace, his dark eyes still full of the same love they had held on their wedding day. Grace, you have been my partner in everything. You have given me 6 incredible children and a life full of joy. You have stood beside me through good times and bad, through drought and plenty, through every challenge we have faced. You are my heart, and I thank God every day that you agreed to marry me despite all the reasons you could have said no. Everyone cheered and raised their glasses, and Grace crossed the yard to kiss her husband while their children groaned good-naturedly, and their grandchildren giggled. It was a perfect moment, a crystallization of everything they had built together. Lucas lived to see their 40th anniversary in 1919, still healthy and strong despite his 60 years. Grace was 57, her red gold hair now silver, her face lined with laugh lines and the marks of a life well lived. They had 14 grandchildren by then, with more on the way, and the Xerxes Ranch was one of the most respected operations in Northern California. On their anniversary night, they sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before, watching the sun set over the mountains they both loved so much. No regrets? Grace asked, echoing the question she had asked so many times over the years. Not a single one, Lucas replied, squeezing her hand. You. Only that we cannot live it all over again, Grace said softly, though I would not change a thing, not the hard parts, not the scary parts, not even the whispers and the judgment. Because all of it led here to this perfect life with you. Lucas lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. Your past never mattered to me, he said, repeating the words that had changed everything so long ago. Only our future, and what a beautiful future we built. They sat together as the stars emerged, two people who had found each other against the odds and created something extraordinary. A love story that started with whispers and shame, but transformed into respect and devotion. A story that proved the past did not have to define the future, that love could heal old wounds, and that sometimes the most beautiful things came from the hardest beginnings. Their children and grandchildren would tell this story for generations, about how Lucas Xerxes had seen past the town's judgment to love Grace Harper for who she truly was, and how together they had built a legacy that lasted far beyond their own lives. It became a family legend, this tale of a cowboy and a former saloon girl who proved that love could conquer prejudice, and that everyone deserved a second chance. And on warm California evenings, when the grandchildren gathered on the porch and begged for stories, Grace would smile and take Lucas's hand and tell them about a scared young woman who stepped off a stage in Marysville thinking her life was over, only to discover it was just beginning. She would tell them about a kind cowboy who said 5 words that changed everything. Your past does not matter to me. And then she would look at Lucas, her husband of over 40 years, and see in his eyes the same love and devotion that had been there from the very beginning, unwavering and true. And she would know, with absolute certainty, that she was the luckiest woman who had ever lived.